Mr. and Madam Chair, we see criminal justice system in current status quo did not put into account this particular culture, right? We see how CJS works under some pragmatic reasons, for example, rapists and other tangible crimes, ladies and gentlemen. They never, in current status quo, not really putting this as considerations. Therefore, our main goals and ideal world that we want to portray in this debate is when court having more diverse considerations of justifications in court, ladies and gentlemen. How they also consider culture as a justifications for them to give mitigations towards the crimes that they done, ladies and gentlemen. We say that in current status quo, we see that there is already an effort, for example, of mitigations, right? There is already, for example, an effort of mitigations in which it reduced the punishment due to reasons, for example, like mental illness, plea guilty in which it is considered that you are wrong, therefore you are give the lesser punishments. And also there is, for example, reasons like youth, ladies and gentlemen, because simply this youth that doing crimes is considered as someone that is irrational. Therefore, these mitigations we think is also identical with the cultural justification, ladies and gentlemen, in which I will later prove in my speech. Also, ladies and gentlemen, our model is that we won't give these people several less punishment because of these reasons, right? We still want the sophisticated debate in which there will be scrutinizations and proper research towards this culture and etc. and the crimes, right? Also, we want, ladies and gentlemen, we want to define what crimes that we mean in here. Crimes that we mean in here is a crimes in which it attacks the important objects and property of this particular cultural people, right? We see culture like, for example, stealing artifacts and etc. that being very, very vital for these people, and also like land defense, ladies and gentlemen, in which they try to defend this heritage of land, ladies and gentlemen, that they protect. We don't want to take like reasons like, for example, you're peeing in the trees, for example. We don't want to take that kind of things, ladies and gentlemen, because it is not that vital and it's not that going to be that much of in this debate, ladies and gentlemen. Also, we want to assume that in current status quo, cultures are not harming society, right? These people didn't have the incentive to harm the other people, right? They only want to how, for example, they are safe to practice their culture without even the restrictions or other things that cost them by the outer society, right? They didn't have that much of incentive to do crimes, right? But they do crimes whenever these people are trying to attack them, are trying to attack their vital property, ladies and gentlemen, in the very first place. Also, ladies and gentlemen, understand that this culture is very essential for them. We see that these people with culture are someone that is minority, right? They are someone that in which they lean on this culture. This culture is the only thing that they lean on, in which this culture provides them a mental security. For example, this culture is the only one that shaped them for centuries, right? They shape how they talk, it shape how they eat, it shape how they do marrying, ladies and gentlemen, and etc. Therefore, it is very essential for these people, and it's really harmful for government to not take this as a considerations, right? For example, they also see this as, for example, the thing that they ask for fortune and guidance for their life, ladies and gentlemen, in which shape the individuals of who they are in current status quo, right? They cannot be modernized that easy, right? They have to, therefore government have to protect this and then conserve this culture, right? But before I jump to my substantive, I will also establish what the parameter of culture requirements that we mean in these motions, ladies and gentlemen. What we mean by the culture in here is we want to give this justification to culture in which it has a structural form, ladies and gentlemen, in which there is some patriarchs or some leaders of this culture, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, it is justified for us to say that this is a culture. Therefore, we don't want to say, we want to hear opposition to say that how you define whether this culture is justified and etc. Right? We also want to take parameter like whether or not it's exercised through so many years, right? So then we don't want to hear anything from ask for government from oppositions that asking what kind of culture that we mean in here, right? Next is my substantive. Why we think that it is important for government to take culture as a justification? We want to prove how this is similar to other mitigation factor in current status quo. We see that in current status quo, it is okay to give mitigation, ladies and gentlemen, right? Like for example, as I mentioned before, mental illness, conceit, or the youth factors, and etc. Right? We say that in current status quo, for example, youth, for example, if you are young, then it's okay to give you mitigations simply because you are seen as someone that is irrational, right? Therefore, if you see this culture people, ladies and gentlemen, they also have that similarity in which they put in the condition that might cause them and to fall into irrationality. What do you mean in here, ladies and gentlemen? They have so many pressure in current status quo. There is, for example, an inherited pressure to protect their property, right? For example, their ancestors for thousands of years mandate them to protect this kind of property. Therefore, you cannot simply steal that property because it has been inherited for centuries, right? Therefore, it is something that is the pressure of these people, right? Therefore, it will cause them to fall into irrationality. But also, ladies and gentlemen, why we think that it's justified? Because it is not individual based, right? This is communal property. This is something that belongs to the culture. This is something that belongs to so many people that being vital for them on their living, right? Therefore, it is justified for us to do so. Also, ladies and gentlemen, why we think that it is justified for government to do so? We see that government have to take this burden because we think that government already taking granted and take profit from this culture, right? They take this culture as, for example, for tourism, as promotions, they sell property, for example, batik and etc., right? That cultural tradition is something that government are trying to use to take profit from. Therefore, it is the burden for government to actually protect these people because simply they take that much of profit from these people, right? Therefore, they should protect them. Also, ladies and gentlemen, it is also bigger pressure for them to do the crimes, right? It is big. I have explained to you reasons like it is inherited pressure or individual communal property, ladies and gentlemen, in which it is giving so much pressure for these people, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, the pressure is really big. Therefore, it is better for us to give this person a mitigation because they simply put in a condition that might cause them fall into irrationality, just like other mitigation factor that given case of mitigation factor that given in current status quo, right? Even if they want to say that it makes, even if government side of the house want to say that it would make people, for example, have a negative sentiment towards these people because simply government, simply society will see that this is unjustified to begin with. We think that it is okay. Why, ladies and gentlemen? Because first of all, we don't erase First of all, we don't erase the punishment, right? We still give them punishment, but lesser, right? Therefore, it is a tangible effect that the government still consider the crimes, right? Because there is still victim that are being oppressed in here, right? They are still victims that are killed. Therefore, it is these people are worth to jail for, right? So there will be no incentive coming from society to actually mock this culture and say that this is unjustifiable to begin with. And what does all our proposals cause you? It affects you deterrence effect, ladies and gentlemen, in which people are making more respect towards their belongings, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, there will be a clear distinction between society and also this particular cultural people. Therefore, they will try to respect these people, ladies and gentlemen, and will do more consideration before they actually get in contact with this person, ladies and gentlemen. That is the ideal world that we try to protect in this current status quo. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have to know that the problem in status quo, how even the culture exercise their own practices in a toxic way, right? In our side, we explain to you that the law is the key to determine whether or not action is good, action is bad, or action is right, or action is false. That it shows to you how we couldn't compromise these kinds of criminal justice systems in order for you to mitigate the harms or mitigate the punishment that you do just because of your cultural practices at the very very first beginning, ladies and gentlemen. So our stance as the opposition team, we want that to stay what happened in the status quo. The punishment would be contingent upon to what is actually your criminal action. So example, if you are killing people, then you should be punished in 5 years rather than you mitigate the punishment because in your culture you rationalize the form of killing people, for example. So several response to the government side of the house, right? They're trying to explain about how this kind of culture is essential things. It's really important to every individuals and it's something that couldn't harm the people at the end of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, first thing, we have to concede that the culture is something that is really essential for the people. But right now, the culture sometimes becomes so toxic, right? What kind of toxicity that happen in our side? We say that this kinds of culture is identified as something that gather lots of people inside of those kinds of culture, ladies and gentlemen. There is a leader behind those kinds of community, for example. There are the followers of these kinds of community. Just like Iksan said that, it is a communal benefit. That's lead to the explanation. There are a lot of people that actually gather into these kinds of community. That is why we say that the tendency to remind each other exists, ladies and gentlemen. The tendency on how people realize the bad thing is much bigger inside of these kinds of community, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we say that we couldn't use these kinds of culture as essential or the parameter that you have to mitigate the punishment at the end of the day, because there are lots of people gathered in the one place and you could remind one another. And I will explain to you more in my argument that why culture is something dynamics that you have to follow the change that happened through the progress that happened in the status quo, ladies and gentlemen. But even if Iksan told you that it's very important to law have diverse considerations to begin with, we said that there is not explanation what is the importance of having these kinds of diverse considerations to begin with, because the law, the government never explained to us why it's going to beneficial in the process of criminal justice system, ladies and gentlemen. And I will explain and prove to you more why in our side the ideal criminal justice system would work in a better way rather in comparative we compromise these kinds of action as a normal things to do by these kinds of culture that happen in those community, ladies and gentlemen. So 2 arguments in my speech. First is that how the ideal criminal justice system in our side, and secondly, why it's hinder the progress of each culture if we mitigate the punishment at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. So we say, what is the ideal, what is actually the parameter on you doing crime and you should be punished, right? First is that intention. It's harmful because it shouldn't, it's harmful in their side because we shouldn't see what is your background, what is your culture, and what is your religion in the law process, ladies and gentlemen. Because we say that it's harmful into determine what is exactly the universal causes that we want to champion on this debate, right? We say that the universal causes like killing people, harm yourself, raping women, stealing something should be punished at the end of the day. Because in their side, most likely the process of criminal justice system would even harmful in the process of law itself, ladies and gentlemen, because the parameter would be irrational in their side. People could hard to determine whether or not this kinds of thing is create much bigger bad action towards the people or not, ladies and gentlemen. The government or the law enforcement would exactly confuse to determine whether or not this is something bad or not. That is why we say that it's really important to stick in the status quo. But also, even if they say that it's about the culture establishment of the culture, we say that understand the cultures, what is the culture in our side. We have to acknowledge this kinds of culture is something that control your behavior, right? Control how you interact with people, exercise your symbol to your culture identity. This lead to make people actually having their awareness to doing those things, ladies and gentlemen. Does lead to answer the question how whether or not these people actually having those kinds of intention, because they are actually aware by doing these kinds of things, ladies and gentlemen. Also, culture is a very changeable and dynamic through time by time, ladies and gentlemen. We have to analyze that the culture is something that is not supposed to be so rigid, just like what happened in the government side, but also understanding that the culture have a tendency to change and be progressive, even though they are conservative. For example, there's always a process of transforming the information, so whether or not something is bad or something is good. That's lead to explanation then why mitigating factors based on the cultural defense is unjustified to begin with, because it's different with the mental illness. It's also respond the case by Iksan, right? we couldn't make it similar. We couldn't make it same because mental illness don't have any kinds of intention to begin with. They have no intention to rape someone, for example. It's different in their side because the intention is there. And also they normalize the value of their own culture to doing those kinds of things, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why the parameter of intention is really important in our side. But also the education and the socialization in status quo is already enough to cater all the problems that might happen in the government side of the house. Example, in Japan, for example, they normalize the culture of suicide. We say that these kinds of events shouldn't be continuously happen in any time, ladies and gentlemen, because it couldn't relate to what happened in the status quo, that people empower one another. People want to avoid any kinds of tendency that suicide happen in many people, ladies and gentlemen. That's lead to explanation why it's harmful in the process of criminal justice system. Second argument, why it's hinder the progress of each culture. We want the culture to not being so rigid, just like what would happen in the government side. Example, the culture of slavery in the past, that people normalize it in the past, that even in the status quo, people already think that these kinds of thing is bad, ladies and gentlemen. Through the progress of these kinds of culture, we also want to create a consistency of law, ladies and gentlemen. This explanation actually refers to how the consistency of law would even exclusive in our side of the house, because people and law enforcement already know what is that, how they determine the action that have been doing by these kinds of people. Even if in our worst scenario that these kinds of culture would be compromises, we say that it's not going to be happen. Why? Because most likely the practices of the culture that you normalize in your side of the house is something that's really changeable, ladies and gentlemen. Example, the culture that you have to rape women, you could change it by isolated them, for example. That shows to you it's not going to lose the identity of your culture to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. But even in worst scenario that this culture could be compromises, we say that it's okay, because as community it's really important to be more openness to the ideal, how to protecting the right of people to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. That is really important to following the universal causes that what I explained it before, because it's something that you could exercise into your own community, ladies and gentlemen. We don't want to make the leaders of these kinds of community or the followers are trying to normalize those kinds of criminal actions, ladies and gentlemen, because people are tend to following the trend that you could actually normalize something that happened in your culture. We say that it's bad because it leads to make people irrational to doing everything, ladies and gentlemen. That is why in order for you to protect the criminal justice system, in order for you to make people to be more rational on doing something, vote for the opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, the government side of the house are going to normalize the practice of cultural defense mitigating factors in court, because we have to investigate whether or not it is within their intention or not. So before I move in further towards my point, I would like to engage towards the opposition side of the house. They are saying that they are saying that culture is toxic, right? There are a lot of cultures that, such as rationalized killings or raping women, but we said that is not what we are talking about here. That is not the culture that we are going to protect, right? Because that is not what the government agrees in the very first place. The culture that the government wants to protect is the culture that actually rational and actually very rich, especially like in the country like Indonesia, in the status quo right now, right? And the second thing that they said that the culture is actually changeable, right? The culture can change through time, right? But that's exactly the reason why the culture that exists in the status quo right now won't be as extreme to killing other people randomly in the street or even raping women in the street, right? Therefore, the crime that they are over glorifying on their side won't be happening and won't be as severe as they claim it to be. Therefore, that the case that we are protecting right now is not really that severe, right? And the third thing that they said that the practice of cultural defense is very problematic, and because we have to punish people under several parameters. They said that we have to punish people because of their action, because of their impact, and the third is because of their attention. But I will engage to that more towards my substantive point. So moving on to my substantive point, we said that the practice of cultural defense will actually deter the cultural crimes in the future, right? So sometimes we push the criminal justice system to the criminal alone, right? Thinking that just because the criminal is doing the impact, that means the criminal is the core of the crime itself. But we never look on the other side that gives the incentive for the crime, for the criminal to do the crime, which is on the victim side, right? In the status quo, the more progressive society are becoming, the more society are looking down on cultures. Lots of modern people thinks that the culture is ancient, that culture is conservative, that culture is something that is not important and that is not relevant anymore. Therefore, most of the modern people, in order for them to actually voice out that we are progressive, they are voicing out their progressiveness by making fun of the other people that heavily influenced by their culture, and recklessly violate those kind of people or those kinds of cultural value just under the reason that culture is not relevant anymore, and just under the reason because culture is something to be made fun of. Such as when there are a lot of tourists when they come to Indonesia, sometimes when they go to the rural community, there are a lot of rules to be followed right there. Sometimes you cannot wear certain clothing, but because they are looking down upon those cultural values, therefore they do something that is not prohibited, that is not allowed there, right? Therefore, we said that such actions can give incentives towards this kind of people, and note that this kind of people that actually doing the crime is actually the people that are heavily influenced by their own culture. Like their culture is their everything, right? That notice that culture consists that in a certain culture that consists of a lot of people, such as the leaders, such as the other ancestors, that give pressure towards this kind of person to actually do the crime, to actually do the crime itself, because those people actually violating their cultural value, and when we normalize the practice of cultural defense in the court, right? It will raise more awareness towards the society that we have to respect other people's culture values, right? When we are raising more awareness, therefore people are going to be more aware and going to respect the cultural values of other people, and which will lead towards the determinant of the cultural crimes such as like this in the future, right? And because like I have explained, that can already destroy the argument coming from the opposition side of the house when they said that the parameter only limits towards the action and the impact and the intention. Like I've said, the intention are going to be there when there is an incentive that is given by the people that are disrespect towards the culture. Therefore, it is justified for us to do this kind of practice of cultural defense in the court, and for those reasons we are so proud to propose.
I think that the government have to pay attention to our argument that which talking about the cultures also can cause the killing to the people that who the violence in a perspective of their culture, ladies and gentlemen. Because we believe that historically in the cultures, they take the killing as the consequences because at the time they still have no kinds of discussion that on how to treat people that do a violence in your culture, for example. So that is why we think that the killing that happened because of you violence the cultures in their perspective is still very exist to be happen, ladies and gentlemen. And also we say that if it's not killing, so what kinds of what things that you want to mitigate in a court, for example, because we believe that the killing itself is something that criminal things that you do. So that is why we think that it is also one of the major cases that happen that people will try to champion it, so they will not get the punishment as that hard, ladies and gentlemen. Response to what the deputy of the prime minister say, they say that it will not unfair to the cultures because the culture also have to hold their value. So that is why it is okay to giving the mitigating factors to the people who killing or even to do other things in a court, ladies and gentlemen. But we believe that it is something that's also unfair in their side because in your side you also have to make sure that all the people who condemn and also who be condemned also have to understand that they're taking the responsibility of the cases that happen, ladies and gentlemen, in their side, because exactly this culture is very is really depending towards to the value inside of the culture. We cannot make sure that people will try that take this advantage of the court will accept the consideration that coming based on the cultural value itself, ladies and gentlemen. For example, just because they believing to particular belief that killing people is okay, we cannot make sure that people who condemn that it's okay to be reduced will try to why that consideration should be exist at the very beginning, ladies and gentlemen. And also in points of the rise awareness in the cultural value, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that to champion the point or which side that can create a better awareness in the cultural value is something that is not too important to explain. Why? Because I think that because whether or not you want to try to defend your cultural value is not only in the court, ladies and gentlemen. Exactly because cultural value is depend on how communal, on how the followers inside of how the people inside of your community believe to your value. So we believe that there will be always people that believe to your certain value, ladies and gentlemen, because you've been teach based on that value. So that is why I don't think that it should not the parameter whether or not the awareness will exist is not depend on the whether or not it will exist in a court as mitigating factor, ladies and gentlemen. Points of extensions why based on these intentions people will try to excuse themselves first to do such criminal things, ladies and gentlemen. The problem is that we believe that the mitigating factor have to give to the people who have the particular problem that cannot be avoided. For example, mental illness, that as my leader of association had already tried to explain. In this case, we believe that the cultural defense is something that still can be avoided, ladies and gentlemen, because we believe that there also the excess of the regulation. For example, government try to regulate that this culture is belong to this particular country. So when the other country try to claim these kinds of things, there will be the mechanism how the people will be treated in a court, for example, ladies and gentlemen. So this is why we believe that this kinds of mitigating will betray the essence of the law itself. 2 points. First, of the deterrence effect and also the rehabilitation itself. The deterrent effects, the deterrent effect will not be exist in their side because they are to believe to their culture, ladies and gentlemen. People will think that they are the right one who have saved the particular problem by their perspective in their cultural value, ladies and gentlemen. Why it's something that happened? Also, the rehabilitation will not exist because the rehabilitation is on how you try to make people understand the value that the failure that you've done, ladies and gentlemen. But the likelihood that happen in the followers in a particular culture is that they more hear the cultural demand rather than the government regulation, ladies and gentlemen. So this is why we believe that when you try to give in the mitigating factor, you try to validate what they've done. So this is why they will try to still believe to their cultural in that bad value, ladies and gentlemen. Why it is problematic? For example, in the worst case scenario, they can kill people in a particular region who not follow the cultural behavior. For example, it happen to two most the vulnerable actors. First is the tourists that coming to the regions. Second of all, the outsider that not comprehensively understand their value, ladies and gentlemen. We say that it is really problematic because the value inside of the culture is very complex, ladies and gentlemen. It is coming from even very small things like everyday changes of behavior, which we believe that the everyday behavior of people have the different perspective on how people say it. Maybe people think it's not that harm, but the people inside of the culture itself say that it's very crucial, ladies and gentlemen. In our side, government will try to still to condemn people if they do the violence, for example, ladies and gentlemen, but based on the failure that they've done. In their side, it will based on the culture itself, which we believe that is something that's not good because the culture itself is very reactive because the value that they have believe for a very long time, they have teach by these kinds of value since they are born, which we believe that we think that it still is something that cannot still continuously relevant to be happen because we believe that people and outsider or tourists itself also have the good intentions actually in that particular area, but they are being blamed, they are being killed because of something because of something that they don't understand to begin with, that's coming from the complexity of their culture itself, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why we believe that it's something that's also important to lead people in their side also will lead people to become a more uneducated society, which in terms of the understanding of the regulation, we believe that government responsibility to educate and also giving the understanding to the society. Society also have to understand and follow the rule. In their side, the government will it will not be happen because the culture that exists will most likely feel that their action is something that legitimate. You let the people to believe with their irrationality and also don't give the way out mechanism that which is better for the failure that they've done, ladies and gentlemen. In our side, the education will still exist because our government will eliminate this kinds of mitigating factor. Society, especially the people that coming from the culture, will try to direct their culture into the better action to respond particular failure that happen in their particular in their era, ladies and gentlemen. Also, they will make their culture to be more adaptive, ladies and gentlemen. So, for example, they will not directly killing people. They probably only to warn them to not do that, or even to report it to the government when it already have the mechanism. For example, the artifact cultural claim and so on and so forth. There have been the mitigation in status quo, the regulation that have protect them to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, so this is why we think that the culture, why a culture also have to be adaptive because the because in your side it will not exist because people will not value the culture, your culture as a good things, ladies and gentlemen, because you're killing, because you murder, it will happen continuously, ladies and gentlemen, because they see it as the legitimate action. The reaction of the society, they will disrespect of what you've done because what you've done is something that is really not support the humanity value to solve the problem. So that is why the motion falls. Thank you.
We think that because even Neny say that culture can be changed too, means that culture can also be adaptive towards the modernization of our status quo and the modernization of people, right? If they told you that culture like people would like to kill each other, people would like to rape women, for example, that's a culture that we do not want to defend, like how Stephanie and also Iksan already told you. If they talk about people who are that indigenous and do cannibalism, that's the thing that government also do not want to defend the culture in status quo, right? Government just let them be like that, and government do not impose the law in status quo because that culture is so indigenous and government don't want to touch it, like for example in Aborigine culture, for example. So that's not the culture that we are talking about in today's debate, right? But let's engage to their characterization of how the culture is that influential, and people will believe it in the end of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, we also agree upon that culture are that influential, but the thing that happened to people who are being influenced by the culture are people who would like to defend their culture, ladies and gentlemen. People who the construction of how that they should protect their artifact, for example, the construction of how they should protect the land, they should protect certain values, and when people attack that, for example, ladies and gentlemen, these people who inside of their culture would most likely defend their culture, and that's the thing that we would like to debate in today's status quo, right? So if that's about killing and etc., it will not happen in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. But let's see what happened in today's debate, right? First, we'll be talking about how they say there is an intention and that, and second of all, how they claim to us that we have to have the consistency of law itself. So first, let's engage to the ideal criminal justice system that they said there should be an intention and act. Ladies and gentlemen, we told you that this is on the act of self-defense and not attacking. They use cultural defense to justify that the intention isn't to hurt but to protect things they deem holy, ladies and gentlemen. But even if it is the intention that is criminal, for example, they would like to attack these people, we think that using criminal defense in mitigating factor will still be okay. Why? First, we told you that the court process exists, will still happen, the debate will happen, of to what extent of guiltiness this person might be, ladies and gentlemen. This point is to explain that first, even if they intend criminally, but criminal has, for example, a right to defend why they do it intentionally, ladies and gentlemen. Or second, maybe it's hard to judge whether the intention of wanting to kill or not exists, but this still can be happen if you're using the criminal, the cultural defense, right? Because in the process of debating, for example, the lawyer will still have the chance to do research, for example, or investigation, for example. What kind of investigation? First, do the community really impose the cultural values to justify is that influential, for example? Or second, that the teachings include the information of you should not defend this to death, or you should protect yourself more, or etc., etc. Kind of mitigating factor that might be worked to hinder this person to doing the crime to the extent of protecting their values and their culture, ladies and gentlemen. So there's an investigation to determine and decide whether the intention is evil or not in the end of the day. But third of all, ladies and gentlemen, if they told you that culture is that influential and people will be influenced to this, we don't think that the lawyer would have the kinds of influential that in the end of the day, right? Because lawyer most likely people who are civilized and not persuaded by something like opposition said. So the intention of doing a rationalized reasonings and a decision-making process inside of the court system will happen in the end of the day. So the intention could be judged whether or not it is that malicious or not in the end of the day. The importance is that we have to make the cultural defense as the mitigating factor for these judges and also the lawyers to be able to see the reasonings of why they are doing so and to justify whether the reasonings is okay or not, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why on the intention we could win the clash. But second, they try to extend this point by saying that there will be a normalization of intention of how people would justify they should do crime because the culture do so. Ladies and gentlemen, we told you that first, it will not happen, right? Because if you say that they will normalize killing, that's not logical because it is universally known that you should not do criminal crime like killing and etc., etc. But why the likelihood inside of the community of the culture will not also exercise these kinds of normalization, right? Because we told you that of course the leader of the community, the culture will impose to that they should not do that such killing, right? But second, there's also a various value that general society impose towards these people who are living inside of that culture. For example, you are not only valuing your own culture, but also you are valuing another value that general society inside of the nation living through, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why there is a balance of culture and there is a understanding of they also should respecting other culture and other values that exist inside of their own nation, for example, ladies and gentlemen. So they will not. It's also to rebut. They will not excusing themselves to do the crime in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why it will not happen of normalization, etc., etc. But even if normalization might happen inside of their house, we told you that the discussion in court will decide the punishment, right? The discussion in court is also including the discussion of whether these people are that malicious. So if they are doing intentionally and within criminal mind and they are normalizing this, means court will judge them to punishment that is severe too or contingent upon the punishment that they have done, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why if these people are to the extent to normalizing this kind of act, we think the court is not also that irrational to decide to make them have the mitigating factor of for example, to not get the maximum punishment in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, because there is an investigation and debating process in which they will judge whether these people are normalizing it or these people really would like to protect their artifact, etc., etc. We think that most likely if these people to the extent of normalizing the killing and etc., etc., most likely their reasonings behind whether they would like to protect their culture will not be that strong, right? Because they just normalize it without thinking that whether it is rational to protect these kinds of artifacts to that, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why we don't think that this kind of, even if normalization happen, means it will not be catered down inside of the punishment and inside of criminal justice system in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. But lastly, let's engage to the consistency of law, right? They told you that a law should be consistent. We told you that law also can change and develop as well as adding something new. If, for example, first, if they feel or the court feel it is necessary, like there is a certain scenario should be covered that not yet covered inside of status quo. Iksan told you that there are several mitigating factors that we have in status quo, like mental illness, like plead guilty, you are youth, or provocating that leads to irrationality. These kinds of 4 points does not just come that 4 directly, ladies and gentlemen. They come from, for example, plead guilty first, for example, mental illness first, and then youth, etc., etc. This is to show to you that there is a changing and development of how law would like to diversify and would like to cater down people who are not yet catered inside of the law system and the law eyes, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why we told you inside of the law it is okay for you to develop and adding something new if you think it's necessary to protect someone else. In status quo, they adding the mental illness because they think that it is necessary to protect someone who do not understand the word. In status quo, we also told you that because there's a factor of, for example, provocation, which means that you are forced to situation to be irrational. We think that actually cultural defense also adding towards that point, right? Where you become irrational because you would like to protect something that holy and that sacred towards your life. And Iksan already told you that how severe your kind of intention towards protecting that in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why it is okay to have the adding something new and developing it. Like, for example, that we have for RUPKS also, right? When you think that you have to protect the sexual cases and etc., right? But the problem is that in status quo, what we define is that people who do not consider law or consider culture is important, ladies and gentlemen, because it is underrated, because it is outdated, not popular, only minority exercise it. This is something that law would like to cater. This is something that law would like to